everybody, and I'm really honored and pleased to see Commissioner Trice. I know you're in the audience. I'm not sure there's anybody else from the commission here. I also see a number of city staff, Steve Cover, Doug Jeffcoat, Rebecca. I'm going to miss people. Chief Rector Touche is here with some of his best and finest. Certainly welcome you and Dan Ornstein, and I'm sure I'm going to miss a couple of people, but welcome and thank you for attending this. We're trying something, this is different. We are, rather than having a panel with city staff or commissioners on it, we decided to go with a little different twist on that and putting some of us on the firing line to try and answer and deal with some of the questions you may have and what our understanding of certain of these situations are. The format we're going to use is we pre-assembled maybe 10, 11 questions that we think are decently obvious ones. We also want to take additional questions from you. And were we passing out 3x5 cards? We were not done. Okay, so at the end we want to have about an hour of dealing with the pre-assembled questions, some of which we think are pretty obvious, and then turn it over for additional dialogue of things that we missed. I'm really pleased that, and I should give a shout out for Right Way Emergency Services who helped us with the room setup and the sound system here, so thanks goes to them for partnering with us on the setup. I'm seeing a lot of familiar faces in the room. Again, thank you. Moderating our session today is going to be John Thaxton, I think known to all of you as Mr. Gulf Coast Community Foundation spokesperson. He's all over the town. All he and his foundation just continue to do wonderful, wonderful things. So today we're going to be discussing a vibrant, sustainable downtown. Let me go through a couple setup slides for you. Downtown, as we define it, is about 1.8 square miles. We have a population in the neighborhood of 12,000 in season. In the last 5 years, we estimate that 60% or so of the city's entire population growth has occurred in this relatively small area. And it will, we estimate, in the coming 5 years, continue to account for a disproportionate, shall we say. New construction-wise, there, as we speak, around 1,200 new dwelling units under construction today, plus another 1,200 or so in the pipeline. At the Quay project alone, I think they're in the neighborhood of 700 on the horizon. So by 2030, a guesstimate is we are going to be at around 15,000 people, greater downtown, again, depending on a definition. I'm not going to, round numbers, 3/4 of a mile radius from here. That's about a 25% increase in population. Real estate sales-wise, things have slowed a bit. Prices are holding, and some of these numbers I report, I'm not exactly liking, but I can tell you that the median sales price of a home in the first quarter of this year was now over $1 million. It's about a 15% increase from 21 to 22, and about a 5% increase over just last year. So sales are, continuing to happen, even in a situation where we are borderline flirting with possible recession. Here's a graph. Don't look at the numbers, but just a trend line. Between 2016 and now, prices of homes downtown have pretty much doubled. So as we have a backdrop for this session on your questions and concerns and observation, we have increasing new construction, new taller buildings. I know there's one that comes to the DRC tomorrow that would like possibly be the tallest building in town. We have also the attainable, the increases in building density that's being considered by the planning department. And we, alongside of all of this, are going to have construction staging challenges. That is, when these buildings are built and come along, there's not much space for where to stage all the equipment and the bricks and mortar and things that are required. So we're going to have 25% more people coming along with that to restaurants, retail. To some extent, we know rooftop bars seem to be in vogue these days, so there could be more of those coming along. There's one being considered, and that's a factor. And we have related traffic and parking implications, and DSCA has been involved in looking at that, not only looking and discussing with planning staff parking, but celebrating some of the successes we've recently had with the trolley, and are there ways to build on circulator vans or iRide, if you've been around town to know those kinds of services. And of course, one of the things we want to do is maintain and enhance pedestrian experiences. I can tell you, living in the Rosemary in the past 5 or 6 years, I don't know, 700,000 trees have been removed, and what can be done. And I think, to the credit of planning staff, I think they have some things in mind on zoning text amendments that might help alleviate that, along with the new engineering criteria, design criteria manual. That's a mouthful, but the upshot of it is I think that there is an interest in wider sidewalks, more canopy spaces, things go on. Now to frequently asked questions again. We're going to have, you may be frustrated by some of the things that happen today because there's in times not going to be answers, but the hope is that we can get these on the table to the extent, FY24 budgets are under discussion. They're kind of half-baked at this point, but not fully baked, if there are, implications there. And again, city staff is here today to hear unvarnished, some of this conversation for their input to take back to their fellow staff members and the commission. So as I said, I think we're going to shoot for about an hour on these pre-assembled questions and then take some others to embroider on that. So at this point, I'm going to take a hot seat on the panel and turn it over to John Thaxton, who we really appreciate being with us to moderate this. Is something he's outstanding at. Here you go, John.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know about outstanding. He said, I like that he said that, please join us after the meeting for a glass of wine, and here I sit with already a glass of wine. That doesn't look really great, but there you have it. Okay, let's get started. First off, I want to give you just a really quick background on myself for those of you that don't know me. I am kind of a rare bird. I'm a 5th generation Sarasotan. My joke is my family came here in '87, and you got it, good. I grew up in central Sarasota County, though, where I still live in the small fishing village of Osprey. It used to be a fishing village. Those of you familiar with Rossler's restaurant, that's my childhood home. So if you've ever been in that restaurant, you've dined in my home. I became acquainted and familiar with land use and environmental protection in high school, and I'm now 65 years of age and have done it ever since. I will be a city resident in less than 2 years. I own a home in Ringling Park that my wife and I are are fixing up so that we can spend our senior years there after I retire from the Gulf Coast Community Foundation. And I've got to tell you, it is an honor to be here this evening. I spent 12 years as a Sarasota County Commissioner, 4 years as a Sarasota County Planning Commission. So I have sat in the hot seat for many years. And for me, groups like this, constructive input like this, and participation like this was the most valuable contribution that I had to my decision-making process. So first and foremost, I want to commend you all for being here, and thank you for setting the stage for this group's participation in the democratic process as we go back to the City Commission and their staff with suggestions and recommendations. I will, and I have been asked to kind of be the fifth panelist from time to time because of some of my background. So I am going to also ask David to assist me in directing some of these questions that have been provided for me. I want to suggest to the panelists to please keep your answers brief, because as David said, we have a great deal of ground to cover here, and I don't want to have important questions near the end sacrificed because we spent too much time on questions in the beginning. And do please make mental notes of questions that you would like to ask at the end, and we will entertain those and put the panelists and myself on the hot seat. And my final words of introduction is I want to personally thank the city, its administration, in particular Marlon Brown, who is a very good friend of us all. This is very unusual that you see the key staff people of your municipality showing up for this type of a discussion. It shows an interest and it paves the pathway for progress. So hats off to Marlon and Steve and the police chief and your team. Okay, so with that I'm going to start with the introductions of our four panelists. And just to let the panelists know, I did abbreviate some of your intros to try to keep them all equivalent. So if I cut out something that you think absolutely must be said, then that's your deal. You're going to have to do it on your own. Deidre Jones. And by the way, I'm going to do these introductions by the order in which they send them to me. So you will know which ones were the first and the most responsive. And you're also going to know which ones were the more derelict in taking their time in getting these to me so that I could prepare for this morning. Deidre Jones has worked in the field of mental health and management for 15 years. Her career includes working with First Step of Sarasota, including the Detox and Mother's Infant program. She then went on to Sail of Freedom, where she counseled human trafficked survivors. After that, Centerstone Comprehensive Treatment Court Program for those with persistent mental health issues. She is currently the coordinator of the homeless response for the city of Sarasota. With years of experience, as well as being a licensed mental health counselor and working relationship with community partners, Deidre has the expertise to apply best practices to those in our community who need the help the most. Richard Harris, in Michigan. His first degree was in physics. His last degree was in a graduate certificate in real estate and urban development from the Virginia Commonwealth University. Richard has served in the Army during the Vietnam conflict and is an instructor in engineering engineering at Fort Belvoir. From there, he served in Germany during the Russian invasion of Prague. Richard, thank you for your service. He has traveled to 49 countries, living in 4 of them, and is an award-winning photographer, taking 3rd place and honorable mention in the International Celebration of Life photo contest, and had a photo essay of, get this, excuse me, if I can get somebody bring me a cup of water, that'd be great. Who had a photo essay on the carpet weavers of Kashmir in the magazine of Oxford Asian Textiles. He's been married for 32 years to his current wife, Christina, and has raised 3 boys in a previous marriage and his 4 grandsons. Richard's first neighborhood involvement was 40 years ago as president of the Neighborhood Association in Cincinnati, where there he completed the Neighborhood Leadership Training Program. Currently, Richard is the president of Bayou Oaks Neighborhood Association, president of the Coalition of City Neighborhoods, CCNA, it's a lot easier to say, right? And a member of and chair of the Newtown CRA Advisory Board. Julie Ryan was born and raised in Massachusetts and relocated to Florida in late 2003. She has been the business district manager for the city of Sarasota for about 10 months. Her current responsibilities include all aspects of managing the Downtown Improvement District, also known as the DID, and the St. Armand's Neighborhood Special Improvement District, the BID, so she's the bidder of the DID, which includes budget, contracts, and acting as a liaison between the board of directors and the city. Thank you, Chief.
It's all about service.
Not expect that. In addition to Julie's extensive governmental operations experience, her background includes a degree in marketing. She's ADA coordinated, certified, and a Florida licensed real estate professional. And finally, the last person to get in their information would be David Lough. As a Detroit area native, he now lives with his wife Martha in the Rosemary District, where for over 6 years he's been a neighborhood leader. You may know him for his work both as a Rosemary District board member and as president of the Downtown Sarasota Condominium Association, DSCA. He has been an important contributor to the efforts that requested the acquisition of Rosemary's first park and the addition of additional canopy trees. Using population and construction data, which he drives me absolutely crazy with all the time, he himself had developed. David was instrumental in the creation of the Rosemary District elements that are now included in the city's master transportation plan that have resulted in Boulevard of the Arts and 10th Street Seascape projects. Prior to his retirement while living in the United Kingdom, Germany, and Canada, David held management positions in consumer product industries where he gained valuable experience that now aid him in his problem-solving and complex issues that he faces working with others here in Sarasota. All right, please give a hand to our 4 panelists. Okay, I'm going to start with the questions, and the first one is, first off, I want to get my timer out here. Thank you. The first one is, and this may be something that most of you can address, but I'm going to.
You have the questions or slides?
Next.
Pardon?
Just next.
I may not have them in the right order.
Okay.
Yeah, I might have changed them around a little bit, David. Sorry about that. Well, that's because you told me that you were not going to post the questions on the thing. In this case, it's correct. What steps are being taken by the city to address the concerns of residents and tourists about the cleanliness of downtown streets and alleyways? Who would like to start?
I can start it off, and I know that there was some discussion at the DID meeting this morning, so I did have some conversations with Mr. Jeffcoat, but Julie, do you want to kick it off and I maybe embroider on what you say?
Sure. Again, the Downtown Improvement District is a subsection of downtown. It is formed by all of the property owners who voluntarily pay ad valorem taxes. And part of that tax is used to supplement city services. So as far as your sidewalk and alleyways cleaning, from a city's perspective, a city operates over a certain level of service that is consistent citywide. So consistently, citywide level of service for sidewalk cleanings is 2 times per year. Obviously, the amount of traffic that happens within the downtown area is extensive. So part of what we have done over the years is the DID has supplemented those cleanings. In addition, City Commission has in the past approved additional cleanings so that the level of service in the downtown DID area is that the sidewalks do get cleaned once a month. So the DID took the level of service from 2 times a year to consistently clean them once a month. In addition, the DID itself does do alleyway cleanings, and they usually typically do 2 cleanings per year. And again, those funds are not taxpayer dollars. There are separate tax that specifically is assessed to only the property owners, which are the commercial or non-residential property owners. So nobody in this room that owns a residential property is paying into the DID funds.
The only thing I would add to that is this is budgeted for annually. So to the extent that you feel that sidewalk cleaning is important, advocate with the city staff and the commission to continue to fund this in the budget.
And I should also add that this is the time of the year that the city is contemplating their next fiscal year budget, so this meeting could not be more timely in terms of citizen input in contributing to the budget process. Great, I'm going to move on to the next question, which is, what is being done to balance the desire? I reworded this one a little bit, David. What is being done to balance the desire of a vibrant and economically sustainable downtown with the livability and quality of life for all residents as it relates to the need for limitations and controls on amplified music? I'd like specifically if the panelists could help us understand the conflict maybe between the amplified music, the quality of life, and the need for economic development, and also what is being done about it.
Let me start. I hope I make this right, but when we talk about amplified sound or noise, we are actually talking about many things. We are talking about vehicular noise, we are talking about amplified noise, we are talking about amplified sound at special events. And this is a matter that has been under discussion. I know I met with the police chief and his staff just recently and what they are trying to do and issuing citations. One thing, just getting into this, I want to digress for a second and ask the question, are we doing enough on the front end of anticipating what licenses or building permits we issue for problems down the road? We know we have, right now, it seems to me that a lot of what I am hearing is that the main complaints have to do with 2 to 3 particular places downtown. And that is a problem, and I know that the chief kind of briefed me on that. But on the front end, one of the things I am wondering is all of these new projects that are coming, the 1,200 on the being developed now, 1,800 coming, multi-million-dollar condos, and is enough attention being given to encouraging these people to use better quality windows? They're moving to a downtown area where there are going to be problems with vehicular noise, and it is very difficult to police. And if you're having a $3 million condo, I would submit that at least there should be consideration of not just base level required windows. I mean, that's one thing. The other thing is, in the development, can we catch some of these potential issues early in the process, where they're flagged and a yellow flag goes up and appropriate due diligence is done by staff to counsel people right out of the box as they're developing their business plans for what is going to be allowed and, so forth. And then I would also say realtors, and I don't want to offend any realtors in the room, but I think there's an obligation of people selling, either the developers or realtors marketing these homes, to be kind of upfront, for lack of a better word. Certain projects have emphasis that they are, downtown and exciting. Well, what does that mean? On the area of something you're not going to want to hear is that in talking with Mr. Fournier, the city attorney, at this point, he is not under direction to bring back a required ordinance to the city commission for consideration. And one of the things that I would consider is maybe workshopping this, because I know we have a new commissioner and time has passed. So I think that's just some of my thoughts on this.
Any of the others want to comment on it? I do. I went through this as a county commissioner. It is a very difficult issue. A couple recommendations that I would suggest is that your law enforcement officers are not the appropriate agencies to enforce a sound ordinance. That is not within their area of expertise. It's very difficult for them to do all of the other duties that they have to do, and then on top of that become acoustic experts. It's just very difficult, because ultimately someone's going to take you to court. You're going to have someone sit up there on the stand, and they're going to have to testify as to their expertise in the area of acoustic management. So in order to really get a control over this, you're going to need your code enforcement staff to be available to do this. And guess what? Most of these violations don't happen during business hours, right? They happen at about 1:30 or 2:30 in the morning. When, again, you don't want to be taking your law enforcement people off of their beat, to stand out in front of a bar with a sound meter, reading the decibels of, rock and roll music. It is a job for your code enforcement people. And you are presently, I don't know this for sure, I haven't talked to Marlon about this, but you're presently probably not staffed to do that. So you're going to need additional staff if you want these types of ordinances enforced. And of course, with additional staff comes additional funding, with additional funding comes additional taxes. So that's just part of the issue. And the second issue that I would raise is that you cannot, the First Amendment prohibits you from governing content. So you cannot just monitor rock and roll music. Whatever sound ordinance you set must also be the same for all other land uses in your community, including things like church bells and things of that nature. So keep in mind that this is a very difficult subject, and one that I can attest is very difficult to accomplish. So we'll move on to the next question, and that is, how can we improve pedestrian safety at key intersections, including, in, for instance, US 41 and Boulevard of the Arts?
I know a little bit about that one, Nick Patel, and I understand that unfortunately, depending on your point of view, at one point a roundabout was slated to be installed there as a traffic calming and pedestrian enhancing experience. That appears that is not going to be possible. Nick tells me that, that there are new signals on order that should be arriving somewhat imminently, and I don't know if Dan is here, but that to improve the situation, it is intended to be a raised intersection there, where it's kind of a table speed bump, for lack of a better word. But I think that Nick and the transportation staff, and I think the police are well aware that we have an issue there. So it is an unfortunate truth that pedestrian safety in Florida generally is a problem. I don't know all the root causes, but I certainly know that Nick and the transportation staff are well aware of these issues and trying to do what they can towards mitigation. And some along Fruitville, I believe there's some new smart technology being implemented to make the traffic signalization and stuff smarter in the long term.
And of course, that's an important intersection for access across US 41 to the new 53-acre Bay Park Conservancy project in the Bayfront itself.
Anecdotally, I can tell you that just doubled,
Yeah,
at least doubled.
I would imagine, yes. Others? If not, we'll move on to how can community engagement be increased for new development projects, particularly those that are administratively approved, to ensure that the community's input and concerns are taken into account during the decision-making process. So CCNA has a meaningful neighborhood input that has been working with city staff. Do we have any updates on this process?
We do, thank you. And I need just a little pushback on the noise ordinance.
Go for it, Richard.
If they were to try that code enforcement officer in my neighborhood, or they might get shot at.
Then that would be a job for the police.
Yes. We get it there somehow. We have been working with a committee called Meaningful Neighborhood Input, led by Jim Ludwig. It's been going on about a year. This all started almost 3 years ago with a committee that included Patrick and me, talking about what we could do about input. And that segued into the current committee we have. In terms of oops, I didn't want those. I wanted, who's got my readers? Here we go.
I thought you were just being cool.
Yeah. It happens once in a while. The upshot is that we have had conversations with Ms. Panica. The Development Services has given us a flow chart of the development process when it enters the system. I had a chance to sit in on one of those meetings. In an hour, we got through a page of about 25 pages of flow chart. This is going to be a long process. What has occurred so far is that Development Services has created flow charts, and I know that planning has been asked to do the same. A case planner who is now responsible to interact with the neighborhoods has been assigned. Let's see, what else we got? The contact email and phone number has been added to these correspondences so that you have a chance to speak with somebody. Now, about administrative review. Ideally, we would like to see that the developer come to the neighborhood first and get approval. That way, when it goes to planning and gets on the clock, and it is a mandatory clock by code, that they don't have to worry about any last-minute changes that would cost them a lot of money. So this is a two-sided approach that we are taking, but that's the ideal situation.
Thank you. Richard, any others want to add to that?
I would just add, that this, unless I'm mistaken, there's a project, a large project coming before the Development Review Committee tomorrow. And I became aware of this a week or 10 days ago, and this is a rather large project, significant. But unless there have been no engagement with the nearby neighbors on this project for input. This is a project that will be potentially administratively approved. So this is, let's just say this, that what we're doing now isn't working real well, to say the least. And the question is, what is a middle road? What is a path for constructive engagement with residents? I would submit from old business school, what's the lowest total cost? That, if you're old enough to remember the FRAM, pay me now or pay me later. Deal with potential concerns and issues up front, try and address those. You may not be all that successful, or try and get 40 people to the city commission meeting speaking during public comment period. I would submit the engagement process, however that would work, whatever that would look like, is going to be better for all concerned and be more efficient, a better community, better use of city staff and of the commission.
Thank you. Move on to the next.
John,
Yep.
I want to add to that.
Yes.
And emphasize, the sooner the neighborhoods are engaged, the easier it is for the developer to get this through the process. So, and I just wanted to emphasize that point.
Good point. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Julie, I think this one's got your name on it. The Downtown Improvement District has done some really great things to improve the downtown experience, which is why I'm moving downtown. Thank you very much. Can you give us an update on some of your key initiatives that you have active? And also, I thought I kind of inserted this one in on my own, maybe some updates on the Main Street streetscaping. But first, on your key initiatives that you're working on.
Okay. So the Downtown Improvement District has been in existence since 2008, and again, their main function and role is to support city services. And some of the things that they have done is, enhance the landscaping. If you've seen some of those beautiful flower baskets that are all around the downtown area, those are fully funded and maintained by the Improvement District. Same thing with the lights on all of the trees. We're actually in the process now of developing our next 5 to 10 year strategic plan. We're hoping to get that underway within the next 6 months as part of the next year's fiscal budget, to look for key initiatives and projects where the DID can enhance the downtown with other potential infrastructure improvements, whether it's park improvements or some wayfinding signage or other types of things that the downtown can do. So we will be reaching out not only to the property owners but to the residents to help us develop that plan. It is important to get a good community input as to what we want to see in that plan going forward, and that would dictate what funding sources and what we'll be doing over the next 5 to 10 years.
Thank you, Julie. Others like to add to that? Okay, there are presently, let me advance the screen here, there are presently over 1,000 new dwelling units currently under consideration, and about another 2,000 in the pipeline just in the downtown area. The city defines rules for construction staging areas. Is there enough being done to ensure that the sidewalks remain open and accessible to pedestrians? There is a particular concern about areas such as the quay. What is your understanding on what is being done to mitigate these conflicts?
I had a conversation with Nick Patel recently, and the first thing I would like to do is compliment city staff, Dan, and whoever's been involved, because I see that street closures in certain areas have been less frequent. There's been scaffolding over the sidewalk a la New York City. We're keeping things open. I think the one project at the quay all along Main. And so hats off to what's been done so far. But looking ahead, I see this as an area that is really going to need to be managed. My understanding, and I could be wrong, Lucy or somebody after can correct me, that something goes through the DRC get sign off, and then parallel with the building permit being issued, the staging permit is issued. And I'm just wondering, is that early enough in the process? And maybe, I don't mean to be unfair to staff on what being discussed with the developer, but I see with all the construction happening right downtown, that we've got something to anticipate and something to work together on trying to manage.
So maybe it looks like one of the areas we need to work on a little bit more. So, Deidre, I bet you're wondering why we asked you to this party. So can you give us a brief update on the downtown homeless situation? And specifically, and in addition, do you feel that almost said Sarasota County. Do you feel Sarasota's ordinance to provide law enforcement with the necessary tools to enforce regulations regarding the blocking of sidewalks, camping out in public areas, and aggressive panhandling activities in order to maintain public safety?
Well, hi, thank you for having me here, everyone. I tell you, I'm terrible with microphones because I talk with my hands a lot, so this is really difficult.
Are you with me?
I'm not, but I might as well have been. So as far as how we deal with homelessness in the city of Sarasota, it's kind of a tricky thing. It's not something where we don't police lifestyles. That's just not what we do. We don't tell you how to live your life. We can't tell them how to live their life. But what we do is we do protect that public space. We do have a right to govern that space. So if there is somebody blocking a sidewalk, there are city ordinances. It's 30-3. I cannot tell you the name of it. I am not law enforcement, so I do not memorize all of that. But I do know the code. It's 30-3, which they can tell somebody to move their belongings or move themselves from the area because they're blocking the sidewalk. And as far as I know, and there are people in the room that can definitely correct me if I'm wrong, we have 100% compliance with that city ordinance. So that is something that is effective. We do have city ordinance against camping. There have been people who have received summons to show up in court for doing that specifically. The great thing about that is that we can offer them community care support on the back end of those where they are actually offered services to still get them connected. We have a full-time case manager that is partially paid for by the city of Sarasota that works with Suncoast Partnership to end homelessness. And they work with that individual to try to make it where they're no longer homeless and no longer camping or doing any of those things. We, of course, don't allow that to continue. Once they're in court, we let them know you can't continue to do that because you'll continue to be in violation, get more summonses, and obviously that doesn't do us any good. I do want to remind everyone this is not something we can arrest our way out of. It's just not possible. So if you give somebody, let's say, a summons for lodging out of doors, the maximum amount of time they get in jail is 60 days, and then before they end up back right back on the street. So it doesn't really do us good just to, hand out summons to everybody and hope for the best that they'll just move along. It's just not realistic, which is why we use those 3 E's that educate, encourage, and then enforcement. We try to educate them about the city ordinances, but also educate them on the services, which are very important, which we have several of around here. We try to get them connected as much as possible, which is why we have 2 case managers. And we just really want to encourage them to go into those services. But if first, second, third time you get in contact with them, they still refuse, at that point it's well, you're in violation of the city ordinance or you're trespassing this area, and we'll have to go ahead and do enforcement. And so everyone's aware there's only 8 of us that do this for the city of Sarasota. There's myself, you have Sergeant Jamie Morrison, who's incredible, who's over the law enforcement side. We have 2 enforcement officers that work very closely with her, and we have 2 outreach officers that work with the case managers. And we're everywhere that we can be, but we can't be everywhere at once. So we do depend on you to inform us of any issues that you're seeing. When I say that, if they're hanging out in a park during park hours, and as long as they don't have a lot of stuff around them because they can't store the property there, they're allowed to be in the park just like all of us are. So there's definitely a balance that we have to keep in mind when we're dealing with this issue. They have constitutional rights just like the rest of us, and if we violate those constitutional rights and they want to sue us for it, that means we can't use any city ordinances. So it's really important that we keep that in mind. Let them live their life, but also offer those services and just really try to help them get into those services and to get help.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add is, obviously this is an issue within the downtown improvement area, And as part, again, the DIG does also budget and contribute $15,000 annually to the Comprehensive Treatment Court Program in order to help with those costs to try to offer those services to our homeless population.
And to let you know what that is, it's a court program specifically for individuals who have chronic and persistent mental health. So these are individuals that you can't say, hey, you just got to move along, because they're suffering with a lot of underlying issues that they really need treatment for. So that $15,000 really helps them in providing them medication, because they're housing first. So as soon as they get in their program, they put them in a house. So they're automatically off the street when they go into that program. So they definitely appreciate the help that the DIG gives to them.
I can add that a year ago, the police chief asked for 10 additional police officers, and that was approved unanimously by the city commission, and it was added in this year's budget. And I was happy to be at a swearing-in ceremony just last week of 10 new officers, and I am told by the chief that there's a class of, if I'm not mistaken, 17 coming up in the not-too-distant future. The intention of the budget approval was 8 foot officers to be dedicated to downtown and the Rosemary. Now, it takes a while to recruit those individuals, train them, of course, but this is working its way through the system. So I believe possibly, not wanting to put the chief on the spot, but possibly by the end of the year, we might see some demonstrable effect of this foot officers, which have in addition to a substantive effect, of a psychological effect on everybody's safety. So hats off to the police for what they're doing now with the resources they have, and looking ahead. I hope the chief, I'm quite confident, I believe the chief has now the budget and the resources he's going to need to do a better job, even better job with the team.
And so I want to pile on this one as well, having been associated with the homeless efforts in the city of Sarasota now for about 7 years. I recognize we have a problem, recognize we need to be doing things a little bit better, but I would encourage you to look at other comparable cities and look at the extent of the problem there compared to Sarasota. And Sarasota is faring extraordinarily well. And I would attribute that to this and former police chiefs and the remarkable efforts of the hot teams that are on the streets, building these relationships with these homeless individuals every day, getting them access to the services that they need, and then they fail. The hot teams come back, they give them access to the services that they need, and then they fail, and then they come back again and again and again and again until they finally have success. So hats off to these, to this hot team. People come from around the country. Do you know that people come from around the country to learn from the hot teams in the city of Sarasota because of the accomplishments that they have had? They had 3 consecutive years of double-digit reduction in chronic homeless populations. And not simple double digits, but double digits in the 20s and the 30th percentiles, which is a remarkable achievement. However, I like to tell the story that there is a single solution for hunger. You know what that is? It's food, right? That's how you cure hunger. There's a single solution for homelessness, and that's a home. Ultimately, you have to have a home. You clearly need the support services, but you have to have a home in order to cure homelessness. Now, we hear a lot of talk about the necessity of providing housing for our service workforce and our first responders, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And how difficult that is. Well, if you think it's difficult to provide to provide housing for someone making $60,000 to $80,000 a year, just imagine how difficult it is to provide a home for someone in Sarasota making $17,000 to $24,000 a year. We have exhausted the supply of affordable housing to those under the 60% annual median income range, now to the point where our hot teams and this system that we put in place that has successfully reduced chronic homelessness in double digits for 3 years in jeopardy. The supply is not there, the inventory is not there, and until we have an opportunity, a place to move these homeless individuals from, we can work all we want to on substance abuse, mental health, behavioral health, employment, but they need a home. So, Deidre, thank you. Deidre, is there, you mentioned this, but I'm going to go back to it really quickly. Is there a resource, is there an actual item that we provide to our homeless population that gives them access to a list of the resources that they can avail themselves to self-assist?
Yes, Suncoast Partnerships and Homelessness actually created a book that has several different resources for them within the community. But oftentimes, if they're connected with our outreach team, we're meeting up with them, we're following through with those resources for them to help them and not, because a lot of them don't have a cell phone. You give some of the gentlemen a smartphone, and it tends to be gentlemen, no offense. But the older gentlemen that have been out there for 15 years, you give them a smartphone, they have no idea how to use it. So it's kind of a difficult process. A lot of resources or online applications, things like that, which is also another hurdle that we have to overcome. So we're very creative in the way that we do that. For instance, we had a gentleman that had never had a birth certificate. He's turning 84 years old this month.
Oh,
and we were able to figure out how to get him a birth certificate. It took us 6 months. It was quite a journey. But again, we just try to be creative in that in any way we can to be able to provide that assistance. But we have a lot of resources. We really do. And part of that is because you all pay for those resources with taxes that are really helping them and are keeping them out of the hospitals, and the hope is to keep them out of detox facilities, bake rack facilities, to be able to keep them consistent.
Thank you, Deidre.
And Deidre, I understand you came with some business cards. So with she's comfortable with getting those business cards out there, and I think you're accessible if anybody has some specific questions or issues.
I did not bring it up for the room,
Okay.
but if you all are friends, maybe share with friends. And then obviously we work for the city, so it is public information if you need to get in touch with us. We do have emails within the city. If you have a concern or you're seeing an issue or you're finding that there's somebody near you that looks like they could use services, just shoot me an email and we'll follow up with them and try to see if we can.
Thank you, Deidre. I'm glad you're here. Glad you're in Sarasota. Thank you very much. We did that one. So this one we may be able to cover very, very quickly. David, I'll leave it up to you. A year ago, Police Chief Trichet proposed, and the City Commission approved an increase in budget to fund 10 additional foot patrols. We've covered some of this. Is there anything that we need to add as to the status of this foot patrol?
No.
Okay, I didn't think so, but I wanted to make sure that we did it anyways. Next question, in light of the reality of climate change, heating urban areas, and the need to provide better transportation options for people, especially pedestrians, how can we increase the number of canopy trees in our city streets in order to accommodate both the heating effect and the excess of pedestrian transportation?
I touched on this in our last session, but between Dan Ornstein's work and Steve Coburn, the planning group, I know they have some zoning changes with enhanced requirements for a pedestrian zone and a amenity zone. In addition to that, we have streetscape projects going on Boulevard of the Arts and 10th. Early stage discussions about Main Street, and hopeful watching of what might be possible on Fruitville medium term, depending on watching how traffic patterns emerge post-roundabout construction. So I would like to feel that that between the green space policy, which kind of requires canopy trees, I've seen that being mentioned more and more often in DRC meetings, reminding developers that canopy trees are preferred, and to some extent the burden of proof is to some extent on them of why they can't be planting canopy trees instead of palms, but I think I'm feeling personally a sense of coming together increasingly over the last few years on a number of fronts. I would add that our tree mitigation fund, unless I'm mistaken, there's $500,000-600,000 in that. Developers continue to pay into that fund in lieu of obligations when they remove trees. So I believe there's a decent amount of money in there that is potentially available. It's just a matter of finding the right-of-way space where they can be used. And I would also add that one of the biggest challenges is utilities and what's under that dirt. And I'm pleased to say that on one project, thanks to Lucia's team, there was they were able to influence a developer, I believe, to reroute a water main out into the street, and so canopy trees could be planted. So I think we need to not only realize it's the will of the developer, but sometimes is the infrastructure and the utilities that are impairment that maybe sometimes we have to step up to the plate and just pay the money to root some of those, because that's going to be the only way we're going to get it done.
Thank you, David. Getting near the end of the prepared questions, so audience members, please prepare to ask your questions. What measures are being taken to address the traffic flow, pedestrian safety, and the overall street experience along Fruitville Road, specifically between US 41 and US 301 Washington Boulevard? Also taking into account the 2 new condominium developments being planned in that area. Is it time to consider revisiting the proposed redesign of Fruitville Road, or what other mitigating things should we be considering?
Well, I partially covered that. There are, right along Fruitville, most of you in the room are not going to know this, there are 2 condominium projects planned right along Fruitville between 41 and 11. And another whole block is for sale for several parcels. So the development along Fruitville is going to happen. And so can we anticipate that? I think it's the view of Nick Patel and the transportation staff, as I said a few minutes ago. They wish to look at how traffic patterns emerge after the roundabouts are complete and people kind of settle into those and see what kind of traffic's there and what kind of roads, and of course money. What kind of money and grants might be possible to fund that kind of project. But Main Street may come first as a priority, but I think Fruitville is on the radar.
And just kind of a historic reminder, Fruitville Road got its name because it was a road that actually led to a town where we produce fruit. It was a long time ago. I remember it, but it wasn't that long ago because I can remember it. But yeah, it just goes to show you the suburbanization of Sarasota County, where Fruitville Road now leads to more suburbs, so maybe we should call it Suburb Road. All right, let's move on. Enough for my editorializing. I don't think we wanted to do that when we covered it briefly. For the panelists, what are you hearing about the residents in your associations or areas about parking in the downtown and near downtown areas? Is it time that we start considering the success of the trolley or bring back the iRider circulator van buses? Richard, do you want to try that one?
Sure.
Okay.
Could I put my sunglasses back on?
You're a cool dude. You can do anything you want to do.
I don't hear a lot about it. I do know that as development comes up our way, it's going to be an issue in our neighborhood. Parking will be a big issue in our neighborhood, and traffic If I've heard it once from Jim Ludwig, I've heard it 100 times. There are two issues: cars and noise. And it's going to be interesting. So, parking downtown, personally, I have not had an issue. It will be interesting to see what happens when we get all the new development, whether there's going to be enough. And especially with the new provisions that if there's affordable housing included, you only need a half a parking space per affordable dwelling. So it will be interesting to watch.
Let me just add, I've met Broxton Harvey, the new parking general manager or whatever, a very impressive individual. He comes from experience in Atlanta. I know he's been making the rounds, getting to know people. He was at DID this morning. He spent some time with us and Rosemary recently, so it's really nice to have somebody with his background. You know, it's hard to keep up with this parking. Front page news of the Wall Street Journal the other day was how, you know, parking is being eliminated in many cities. I would submit that, you know, when we see that, we need to be careful, because Sarasota is kind of a weird duck in a way. I mean, every city may have more rapid transit than we do, with an older demographic and so forth. But I think holistically looking at this is what's required. So looking at van circulators, leveraging the success of the trolley system, I-ride type of things, even if we test that. I think that there's some things there. I will tell you anecdotally, I live in the Rosemary, and I foresee some issues coming there because of restaurants and just the density of things and street parking available. And the interesting question is, at what point do you compromise streetscape to get more parking? So if the community prioritizes street tree and trees, well, then something's got to give, and it's parking. There may be some out-of-the-box solutions, and I know they're floating around. I know the Bruns Court area has some concerns about the theater down there. So I think Broxton is looking at this. I think they're going to have to be creative in this, but there are going to be some trade-offs that we as a community are going to have to come together.
Okay, others want to add to the parking? No? Julie? Dee, what do you think about parking? You get your homeless people parking?
I'm glad I have a city pass.
Okay, that does conclude our prepared questions. So, David, do we want to just ask the audience if they want to raise their hands? And I think that's probably the thing to do, considering the hands just went up.
Yep.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to leave it up to you to pass the mic for who you would like to ask.
Okay,
this
and
question.
may I just ask, respectful of questions, not so much comments, if you would, please, and take it away.
Too late, I was starting with a comment. Just so people know, you presented the windows in terms of new buildings to help cut down as a method for noise abatement. I'm from One Watergate, and a 41-year-old building. We updated all our windows to a standard that allows for noise abatement. It is definitely worth doing, and I offer to anyone in the room here who would like to see the difference, if you can walk over to One Watergate at night and listen to the jazz coming from the hotel rooftops and walk into our building, you will see the impact that decent windows have in noise abatement. Now I'll work to my question. My question is, what are we doing to orient and educate the average condo owner as to what affordable housing actually means and what the market is? Who is the target market for affordable housing? I think it's important because people tend to think of that as, oh, those poor people are coming in, and that is not the issue. But what are we doing to orient and give or educate the average condo owner as to what is affordable housing?
John, can
Yeah, sure. So think of housing as a continuum. And think of housing as a necessity. Housing is not a luxury, right? Everyone needs food, everyone needs water, everyone needs housing. So once you've established that, you need to then look at the affordability of housing, and affordability is tied to incomes. So the rule of thumb is that a household should not spend more than 30% of their income on housing. Now, the marketplace does a really good job of providing housing for those with higher wages and or accumulated wealth. But there is a point at which the market cannot, and I emphasize the term cannot. This is not a conscious thing or a willful thing. This is a mandatory thing, that the market cannot provide housing for lower income households simply because by the time you add up the cost of land, the cost of construction, the cost of labor, the cost of materials, you reach a point where just simply building the housing unit to not surpass the 30% increase, the 30% wages is impossible. You can't do it. It just simply can't be done. So that is the place where government, philanthropy, and other entities need to come in to incentivize and subsidize that, subsidize that gap that is necessary to not exceed the 30% of wages to the affordability of the housing. So that's what when we talk about affordable housing, we're talking basically about that housing at which the free market itself does not provide. That requires some other subsidy or some other incentive to do it. That's why we talk about expedited permitting. We talk about affordable housing trust funds. We talk about inclusionary zoning. We talk about all of these other hosts of things that the government and the philanthropic sector can do to narrow or eliminate that gap between the cost of constructing and maintaining affordable unit for every income level of all working households in Sarasota County. So that's typically what we need by affordable housing. Then we get into the realm that Deidre works in, where the incomes are extremely low, and you have things such as rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing needs that require continuous subsidies in order to maintain these persons in these households. But generally speaking, affordable housing, or like the city likes to call it, attainable housing. I prefer affordable housing because you can actually attain housing and then lose it. That doesn't really help you out. So affordable housing is housing that the market does not provide, that consumes no more than 30% of a household's income in order to acquire and to maintain the housing.
John?
David? Yeah. Richard?
Good question. It's my understanding that the affordable zoning text amendments will apply to new construction only, which means you probably will not see affordable units in any existing condominium right now. It will be interesting to see how much affordability we're actually going to get. You know, the amount of land in downtown is limited, so it's going to be interesting. We need to watch. As to educating, also an interesting question. The realtor is going to have to say there are affordable units in this new building. And that's what, yeah, but existing condominiums, it's not going to happen. You won't see any.
And I would also just like to, and we'll get to the next question, one more quick thing on affordable housing. Just to give you a concept of the magnitude in Sarasota County, I know the county numbers better than I do the city. There's 172,400 households in Sarasota County. 40% of those households, or in excess of 60,000 of those households, spend in excess of 30% of their income on housing, which means that you have 60,000 cost-burdened households in Sarasota County, and that's before the real estate boom. That's before 3 consecutive years of double-digit increases in rents and the cost of housing. In addition, you have another 18,000 households in Sarasota County that are spending in excess of 50% of their income on housing. Now you say, why are those numbers important? Because if you are spending more than 30 or 50% of your income on housing, every month you're making a decision what not to fund. Is it going to be my child's health care? My child's education? Is it going to be reliable transportation? Is it going to be utilities? Is it going to be daycare? If you are spending in excess of 30 or 50% of your household incomes, you simply cannot meet all of the living expenses associated with living in Sarasota County.
John, I have 2 things to your thing for the...
It's up to David. I'm going to let David control this.
This is a different topic, but would it be possible to do some kind of traffic control between Main Street and Orange Avenue, or even Osprey on Mound? Like speed bumps or something that could slow traffic down, because we've been in that location, we live in a condo in that location, we've been there for 31 years, and I can't tell you how many times we've had to call the police or an ambulance for the accidents that occur between Main Street and especially Orange Avenue on Mound. Cars and motorcycles and those motorbikes, they are screamers, they're loud, but they speed, and it's very, very dangerous. So.
Okay, I can say this, Dan Ornstein's in the back of the room, and I think I saw him make a note of this. So I think you're the right persons in the room to consider what you've said. Thank you.
David, I have 2 things to John, 2 resources for you guys.
Sure.
If you make it brief, please. I'll make it real brief.
The Advocates Guide from the National Low-Income Housing Coalition has a book that tells about all the housing programs in the United States. Also, Florida, which is flhousing.org, has all the other guidelines for housing, and has one on affordable and a whole bunch of resources there for you.
Thank you, and I'd also suggest that the City of Sarasota has an affordable housing an affordable housing advisory committee, and they have made about 20 recommendations to the city how to deal with affordable housing. I would commend that you look at those recommendations because they are extraordinary, and they were adopted with a unanimous vote of a very diverse group of City of Sarasota participants. Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to get back to the issue of noise, especially downtown. The comments that it's primarily 3 establishments that are causing it at late night hours. It seems to me that police would be ideal for that, actually, because they're patrolling past those establishments and they're out at the late hour. So I'd like to suggest that that might be something they need to look into. As far as noise for windows, to me it's sort of like it's not addressing the actual problem. It's like if you had an arson problem, you're going to build a flame retardant building. You should be looking at the source of the behavior that's causing the issue and trying to address that. Thanks.
I hope I made my point. It's both. You know, if you can get it early on, try and mitigate it. But certainly your point's taken up. I know for the chief and his team are on these habitual offenders, and I believe there were some additional citations issued last week.
This meeting started with comments about development. For me, it's scary. My question is, what can we really do about development? What can we, as residents of this city, do to influence those who control development to consider what it's really doing to the lifestyle? My wife and I moved to the county 25 years ago. We've been downtown now for 7 years because of the quality of life that we saw. And all the topics that we're discussing here, we talk about traffic, we talk about problem with parking, we talk about noise, we talk about pedestrian safety. All of it is impacted because of development. And when we hear, David said it loud and clear, development on Fruitville Avenue is going to occur. And that is what I see as the problem with the city of Sarasota. Development is occurring everywhere. You drive down Coconut Avenue, small parcels, and you know what's coming next. And if we really want the quality of life of the city, I think we have to do something about development.
Let me just address that, because it is kind of it's a question that I have heard for decades and decades and decades and decades and decades. It's a subject that I have published on for decades and decades. And the answer to what can you do about development is remarkably simple. And there really is only one answer to that question. And that is that the state of Florida delegates most, now far less than it used to be, land use decisions to the, 237 municipalities of the state of Florida and the 67 counties that have elected officials that govern and make the decisions on their comprehensive plan, their land use plans, their zoning ordinance, their land development codes. And that is what controls the level, the magnitude, the location, and the intensity of development. So if you have elected officials that share your views, then you can, quote, do something about development. If you have elected officials that have a different view, then they're not. So the answer to the question, and is really very simple. You need to elect officials that share your perspective on growth and land use issues in your community. And that's not, I'm not trying to be biased or anything here. I've looked at this for 44 years now in Sarasota County. But aside from that, I'm sorry, it really is. It's just that simple. David, who's next? Oh, we got somebody up there.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
I can.
A few comments, and I'll try to make it as quick as possible, okay? Regarding the Development Review Committee, the DRC, unlike the Planning Board, unlike the City Commission, they take no public input at their meetings. That's just not right. They need to take public input, just like the Planning Board and the City Commission, okay? Second item, as far as the sound ordinance is concerned, we've been waiting almost 3 years for Fournier to issue the revised sound ordinance. That revised sound ordinance needs to incorporate items such as plainly audible, so we don't have to worry about taking decibel readings. It needs to incorporate special events, traffic, etc. I've spoken several times at the commission meeting, and I've sent several emails to please, why can't we issue the revised sound ordinance? I've gotten no response from anybody. What we need is, we need the weight and the influence of of you guys, okay? And also CCNA and DID. We need that influence so that you get some responses to, why can't we issue the revised sound ordinance? Next one, okay, real quick, is the revised.
Are you going to change the topics?
Beg pardon?
Well, I'm just going to say, David, it sounds like we have yet another item that needs work.
John, I believe, and this answer is not going to be what you want to hear, but I am told in conversations with Bob Fournier that he is needing some more direction from the City Commission to move ahead with the sound ordinance. Not that it would take long, but I think we have a new commission makeup at this point. I realize that it was March or April of last year where these things were drafted, but I think that to move this forward is going to, and my suggestion would be maybe a workshop, a commission workshop, be convened as a manner to discuss this so Bob Fournier can be provided some direction on this. At the moment, I believe he's frustrated with not being given the direction to clearly move ahead to do his job.
Thank you, I've heard that before, okay? But
I'll come back to you. Let Richard talk, and then I'm going to go back to you. I promise. I'm not taking the microphone.
Yeah, I want to address the DRC comment, please. The DRC is a body that studies concurrencies for code and traffic and all those other things. It is not an input point. However, having said that, one of our goals is, and Lucia is working on this, is that the case planner will come listen to the neighborhoods as they come to the DRC. But the DRC is not a point of input. It's about technical concurrence to city code.
It should be though.
We have, if we do it right, we get that before it goes to the DRC. We get the neighborhood approval before. No?
We're not going to give neighborhood approval.
Wait, Dan, wait a minute. I'll come back to you. This gentleman right now has the floor.
Yeah.
Richard, first off, Richard, were you finished with your remarks on the DRC?
I am. It is not a point of input for neighborhoods. It is a point of input for the technicalities, not us.
I understand what you're saying.
Dan, no. All right, I'll go back to you.
I understand what you're saying. However, I think it should be considered that public input at the DRC meetings, people don't always know about neighborhood work.
We are working on getting the case planner to listen to the neighborhoods.
I'm sorry, John, real quick, okay? Regarding the sit-in line, so we've been waiting almost, back to the sound ordinance, we've been waiting almost 3 years. We need your help to get it through. Regarding the sit-in-lie ordinance, we've been waiting for that revised ordinance for almost 2 years, okay? I heard the comments about the current ordinance, okay? One of the problems with the current ordinance is people are allowed to camp on the streets as long as they're not preventing pedestrian traffic. The new revised ordinance would eliminate that. So we need that also. So we need help to get these revised ordinances issued. One last thing, I'll be quick, okay? I came from Fort Lauderdale. At the beginning of every commission meeting, they had a police report. A policeman reported on the crime and what was going on in the city and what was going to be done about it. I think it would be a great idea if there was a police report at the beginning of every commission meeting. Thank you.
Very good suggestions. Yes. Next. Who you got? Okay. And let's make sure we get Dan.
Two things, first a comment and then a question. The comment is, I always hear these concerns about the intensity of development in downtown Sarasota, and when it's expressed, everybody cheers, nothing happens. Hey folks, it's a zoning issue. Look at the zoning map. If the whole downtown is divided into plots, and they're zoned, and if the zoning is 10 stories on a piece of ground or a 2-story building, it's at some point it's going to be 10 stories because you don't tear down 10-story buildings and replace them with 2 stories. You replace 2-story buildings with 10 stories in Sarasota because it's hot and it's going to get better. There's money flowing in. Nobody's going to tear down a 5-story building and replace it with a 2-story. Look at your zoning maps. Everything that's zoned 10 stories, 50 years from now, is going to be 10 stories. It's a one-way ratchet. If you don't like it, change the zoning. All right, my question is...
And how do you change the zoning?
I don't know in Florida. I know in California where I was a mayor.
Only the elected officials can change the zoning.
I'm just telling you, okay, if you can't change the zoning, then you're going to get what you don't want, which is 10 stories everywhere and 18 stories around the edge. That's what's going to happen, because you can't tell somebody you bought a piece of ground, it's zoned for 10 stories, there's a 2-story building on it, and no matter what you propose, we're not gonna let you build 10 stories. You can't do that. So you're gonna get 10 stories everywhere that it's zoned 10 stories, unless you can change the zoning. My question is, my concern, and I'm the only one in downtown that has this concern, so I apologize, it's the aesthetics. Apparently the city cannot reject the building because it looks ugly. And I raised this with city staff recently when I finally got fed up with looking at the Embassy Suites. It looks like an old Soviet apartment building. Just an 18-story wall of windows, no architectural relief on it, as compared, as I pointed out, to the Art Ovation, which has windows, but each of the windows is 4 differently sized rectangles so that it looks appealing, and there's architectural relief on the side that casts shadows. It's actually nice to look at, but then I look the other way, and the part of the Embassy Suites that faces our downtown is this ugly Stalinist apartment block. And the guy on the city staff says they have no control over how it looks. There's all kinds of setbacks and rules that have to be met, of course. But if it looks ugly, you gotta take it. And I don't like that because I was mayor of the city and a city council member there, but we rejected buildings that look ugly. I guess you can't do it in Sarasota. I don't know.
Yes, sir.
About several weeks ago, I was in my den with my wife. She was reading a book or doing something, and I was on my computer pretending I was doing something.
If you can keep the mic close to your mouth so the people in the back can hear. Thanks.
You all hear my joke?
There it is. There it is.
Anyway, I got a telephone call from my neighbor, sitting right here, Linda, to tell me that there's a new building proposed downtown, and it's going to be 327 feet high. 327 feet high originally. And I said, that's impossible. They will not let that happen downtown. So I got a call from her a week later. I said, well, guess what? It's changed now. It's 342 feet. And this is actually, this is...
I'm sorry, go ahead.
This is a building that does not belong in downtown. It's on Palmy Avenue. It's in a residential place that people are there by the hundreds of thousands all the time. And you're going to put up a building that is 120 feet higher than what's the one on the corner of Main? The Jewel. Look at the Jewel. And then imagine this building is going to be 120 feet higher than that. It's going to block the sun in the afternoon from coming in. God knows what it'll do to the wind, which we have a very windy area there. It's ridiculous. It's on a tiny lot. It's just not going to work, and it's got there's a lot of things wrong that I won't go into now, but there are a lot of things wrong with their proposal that are not within code. And somewhere I have a feeling no matter what we do, that building's going to go up anyway, and it does not belong there.
So I did I'm not going to comment specifically on the merits of it, but I would note that presently the tallest building in Sarasota is the Ritz-Carlton Towers, not the residence, the building itself. And then the second tallest presently is Plymouth Harbor. And now we're talking, so the Ritz-Carlton is 261 feet, and I believe 1268 Palm Avenue Condo is anticipated to be 350 feet.
Bigger every day.
Right, so it's going to be about 89 feet taller than the existing tallest building, Ritz-Carlton. And to kind of give you an idea of how times change, Plymouth Harbor, which was a building that I believe it was Frank Folsom Smith who was the architect on that building, built in 1966. It's 250 feet tall, and it has 25 floors. So compare that to the Palm Avenue, which is 100 feet taller with only 18 stories. So it's very clear that if you want to limit height of a building, you need to be focused on the height of the building rather than the number of stories, because the number of stories can differ dramatically with the building. And that's obviously a sign of the times where people want these larger suites and higher ceilings. So I don't know if there was a question in there, but I think it would be interesting to see if, in fact, what I would suggest is that you look, or have DSCA look into the claim or the realization that is 1268 Palm Avenue within the adopted codes or not.
I can say that DSCA historically does not get involved in individual building matters. I will be at the DRC tomorrow. It'll be interesting to see what conversation occurs there. DSCA is very interested in process, and this is one where I mentioned early on that, to my knowledge, there's been no consultation. I became aware of this, I don't know, 10 days or so, there were rumors about it. But you know, DRC agendas typically come out 8 or 9 days in advance of the DRC, so there's relatively little time. Some of these kind of come out of the blue, and this one is. So I want you to know, personally, I can't speak as DSCA president because I share your concern.
We want to keep the quality of life that's there in downtown Sarasota now. This building fights against it. It does not belong there.
Okay. All right. We probably have
one more.
Okay.
In June.
Could you explain to the audience preemption from Tallahassee and also the statute of by right? You're well aware of those concepts.
By right, meaning the administrative approval process?
Right,
Jim?
which is
yeah, I can
our
do
problem
that.
here
Make sure I
is
understand the
zoning
question.
that preceded a lot of this, and we can't downzone it.
Oh, okay.
We can only upzone it. We can take a 10-story area and make it 18, but we can't make it 18-10. And then the preemption of a lot of our ordinances from Tallahassee.
So presently, first off, and this statement gets me in a lot of trouble with my state legislators, but I'm less than 2 years away from retirement, so it's like, what are they going to do, fire me at this point? The state legislature makes a sport of reducing the discretion of local governments, including city commissions and county commissions, and they have been doing it for decades. It happens every single legislative session. So I could spend the entire evening going through the history of the state legislature removing discretion from your city commission and your county commission, but there are two in particular that are pending right now. Number one is a rule that would prohibit your city commissioners or the county commissioners for doing anything to improve water quality. All of those decisions will then be relegated to the state officials, who I would suggest have, let me rephrase it. Yeah, I'm gonna thank you. I'm gonna start that one over. I would suggest that your local officials are less influenced by major water quality impacting industries, how's that, than are the people in Tallahassee. So, not to mention the fact that water quality concerns are varied throughout the state, whether you live in the Heartland region, whether you're on the Atlantic Ocean, whether you're on the Gulf of Mexico, whether you're in the Panhandle, it's very different. So local control over water quality is very important. And the state legislature is right now considering a bill that would prohibit your city commissioners from doing anything that would improve water quality, such as red tide and red drift algae and things like that. And then another bill is...
Do you have a bill number?
No, I don't, sorry. And then another one is a part of the affordable housing bill that is now going through. It may even be improved. And I don't know all the details on this one. I just learned about some of the details this weekend at where was I at? CCNA? CCNA, where if a developer is providing a certain threshold for affordable housing then the local government cannot regulate certain elements of the development proposal. And they include height and density and things like that. So the state legislature, for better or for worse, now you may think this is a good idea, that the state be in charge of water quality, and that the state be in charge of the height of buildings that are providing for affordable housing. But nevertheless, that is what Jim is referring to
That bill
in
is on
terms of
DeSantis' desk.
It's on where?
DeSantis' desk.
Okay, that was on the governor's desk.
SB 102.
SB 1, right.
SB 102,
Right.
Live Local Act.
Yes. So there's a lot of maybe good things in that one, but that's in there. So that's what is referred to as preemption from the state government to the other. And then the other part of it is vesting. Once you approve a zoning ordinance and vest a property with certain rights, in order to remove those rights, you run afoul potentially of the U.S. Constitution, the state constitution, and property rights laws that are unique to Sarasota, unique to the state of Florida. It's very difficult to remove those rights once they're granted. That is why it is also important that elected officials assess all of the impacts of a zoning code or zoning text amendment change before the decision is made, because once it's made, reversing it is all but impossible.
Okay, let's do this. Cheryl, one last question, if we may. We're running over, but please, one of you.
Okay. My name is Cheryl Gauthier, and I'm the founder of CityPAC. CityPAC is a resident advocacy organization, and our mission is to help identify and endorse candidates for the City Commission who are resident friendly. Now, that's a segue to my question for CCNA. Early on in the presentation, I heard you to describe CCNA's role to have better citizen input to the planning and development process as an opportunity to, what sounded like, smooth the way for the developers. Now, I hope you didn't mean it that way, but that is certainly the way it sounded. So I would like to hear you elaborate on how CCNA will be a better advocate for the residents in the development process.
How much time do I have?
Not much. I'm thirsty.
If this is going to work to improve the input from the neighborhoods and residents, there has to be a buy-in from the city. The city is not going to buy in unless the developers buy in.
You might as well give up then.
Hey, Dan, be an optimist for a change, please. So, if we get the neighborhood input at the beginning of the process, and we get neighborhood buy-in at the beginning, why do we need to hinder the developers as they move through the permitting process? That's what we mean. We need access to this information as soon as possible. One of the major problems is, and I have seen this every time somebody comes to buy New Oaks. We want to do this. Well, what do you want to do? There's no picture, there's no site plan, there's no elevation, there's nothing. We need that at the beginning so that we can approve it. Once we approve it, why do we need to stop them?
What if we don't approve?
Let's, hey folks, we're out of time, and this is, I can see this is getting into an area that could go on. And I think the positive element of it was that there's a dialogue going on. CCNA is going to be involved, others in this, including DSCA.
We are expanding we think we're going to expand the committee to include more people from the neighborhoods.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, I want to close it off by thanking you all for coming, thanking our panelists, Dee, Julie, thank you so much, and thank you all for attending.